Hi everyone, sorry I missed you last week. Let's get back to business as usual with the Draft FPL Game Week 10 preview. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official Draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another Game Week preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems and general Premier League chat ahead of Game Week 10. Game Week 10, can you believe it? 9 down and we're into double figures already. It seems like only a couple of weeks ago we were doing the pre-season content and the stuff in the summer. And quarter of the season gone already, just like that. And it's kind of a time to really be able to take stock of how your teams are shaping up, how the leagues are shaping up, whether you've got some catching up to do or whether you need to kind of solidify your position at the top if you've managed to get there already. As I said at the beginning, apologies for missing last week for the Game Week 9 preview. Lots of life admin going on at the moment. I dare say it may not be the last one that gets skipped before this season is over. But for now, let's try and get back into the swing of things. And as I said, business as usual for this one. For those of you that missed the Game Week 8 preview, which was the one before, I mentioned in that one that we're currently running a 1-month free trial period again, which we normally do every year. So you'll be able to see that on the screen for those watching on YouTube. But for those listening, it's DFC Free 24. That'll also be in the description below, so you can copy and paste it. DFC Free 24, that'll let you sign up on a standard monthly plan, which is normally $3.99 a month, and get the first month absolutely free. Basically, try before you buy, and if you don't like it, you can cancel at any time. Obviously, if you do take advantage of that free trial, it will give you the usual access that any paid member will get, which means you will also get access to the Discord server, which has been set up now for a couple of weeks. And I think we're up to well over 100 Draft FC members in that group now. So it's nice to have a real dedicated core group of draft managers to talk all things draft. And it's been nicely active so far, talking about trades, waivers and everything else. Really nice growing community already, and a much better place, a better space for myself to kind of join in the conversation. Also, Let's Draft FC Taz chat all things about the website a lot more easier and gets it to the eyes and ears that need to hear about it. And yeah, it's just really nice to see that growing. So if you want to also get into that exclusive club and don't want to pay for it just yet, then you could use that code DFC324 and get in there. So I'm recording this episode on Tuesday the 29th of October, so any team news, injury developments or press conference info are up to date as of then, and of course subject to change. There are a decent number of Carabao Cup games today and tomorrow, so plenty of opportunities for injuries and considerations that may impact the predicted lineups for the weekend. The waiver deadline will be at the conventional time this week of 11 a.m. on Friday. And I need to change my slide again because we've got British summertime, which we are now no longer in. 11 o'clock Friday, and then the main game deadline will be 11 o'clock on Saturday. Some of the players I'll be discussing in this episode include Ryan Aït-Nouri, Buonanotte, Savio, plus many more. So let's get straight into it. So let's kick things off with Waiver Watch. This data comes at you courtesy of us at Draft FC. As I said many times, if you are a signed up member, all of this info is there for you too. None of this is kind of exclusive to our eyes and ears at Draft FC. If you're a signed up member, you have exactly the same access as I do. So let's have a look at the main players that were coming in and out ahead of Game Week 9. So we had Michael Keane in, Jorginho, Buonanotte, Strand Larsen, Pinnock, Raul Jimenez, Vissa, Aït-Nouri and Garnacho. So actually quite a few names on there that we will be discussing in this episode. The players making way: Harvey Barnes, Mohamed Kudus, Kyle Walker, Xerxes, Leif Davis, Duran, interesting, Trippier, Mateta and Sancho. Some big names dropped there across 8-team leagues, and some names there that quite possibly are going to be looked back on with regret for those managers that did drop some of those names, particularly Jean-Philippe Mateta, who got the winner against Spurs at the weekend. Let's talk through some key injuries and suspensions ahead of this weekend. For Arsenal, Gabriel went off in that game against Liverpool. No clear news on how long or indeed what the actual injury is at the moment. but is certainly a doubt. The same for Dunk, who was due to start at the weekend, but got injured in the pre-game warm-up. So, again, not a huge amount of detail on what's going on with him yet. Sancho is ineligible to play against Man United. McNeil got subbed off early in Everton's match at the weekend too, and again, we don't have much more info on that. Probably not a huge consideration for draft managers, but Ogbeni may have been picked up in some larger leagues. His season is done. He unfortunately ruptured his Achilles tendon, which is possibly one of the worst injuries you can get as a footballer. Definitely worse than an ACL injury, for example. Won't affect the duration he's out for so much, but it's just really going to be a roll of the dice as to how much of the explosivity and speed and endurance he can get back to when he's recovered from that injury. De Bruyne is the kind of usual vague comments, which we'll come on to actually a bit later on in this episode, but again, we're not entirely sure when he'll be back. Same with Kyle Walker. Gordon didn't end up playing at the weekend against Chelsea with what we are hearing is a groin strain. Don't know the severity of that, so again, don't really know when he'll be back. And another one who's ineligible to face their parent club is James Ward-Prowse as Forest take on West Ham. So let's get into some of the main picks. So we'll start with some defenders. Obviously a bit of a theme there for the opening three. I like the Everton defence. Their next 5 games are Southampton away, West Ham away, Brentford at home, United away and Wolves at home, which is very good ahead of a completely guilt-free drop ahead of Game Week 15 where they go into Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea and City 4 weeks on the bounce up to Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Branthwaite is back now, so I think we'll see a settled back four of Young, Tarkowski, Branthwaite and Mykolenko, barring any other injuries. I was impressed with Ashley Young, actually, in their last outing against Fulham. He can look a bit passive at times, and the legs aren't quite as quick as they used to be, but he's positionally very efficient and delivered an absolute peach of an assist for Beto's equaliser. Really not a great deal to choose between them, but Mykolenko is probably my least favourite of the four, and I'd have any of the other three. And in fact, I already have Tarkowski in my main league. The Crystal Palace defence is another one to consider. They've got Wolves away and Fulham at home in the next 2, and they're coming off the back of an absolutely rock-solid performance against Spurs with a back three that is really starting to look formidable, not just on paper, but actually on the pitch too. If you remember a few weeks ago when Kieran and I went through every club, we discussed the prospect of Chalobah, Lacroix and Gueye in a 3, and I'm confident that trio will keep a number of clubs out this year. It's been a very tough start for Palace so far. They did not hit the ground running as many expected them to, and Glasner was potentially up for the chop if they didn't win at the weekend. Certainly if they lost badly, I think he could have been looking for another job. But yeah, it's obviously a massive pressure reliever for them getting that 1-0 win against Spurs. I think they could really be the sort of Everton of this season in terms of defensive stats, and I would not be surprised if Dean Henderson is competing for the top spot in terms of FPL goalkeepers come the end of the season. Now, again, similar to Everton, I think we can be relatively assured of the personnel, barring any injuries. Mitchell and Munoz will flank those 3 centre-backs. Those wing-backs remain the pick of the bunch, but we've seen that those centre-backs can be a threat from set pieces as well, and they're all options if you're looking for a streaming defender to do you for a week or two. A player that probably has to fall outside of the definition of a streaming defender is Ryan Ait-Nouri. 3 goals now in 4, 5 attacking returns for the season, and Wolves now enter one of the best fixture runs for any team at any stage in the calendar that goes right up to Christmas now. He is well overperforming his expected goal involvements, currently sat at just 1.6, but he is the closest I think we've got to an out-of-position defender this year, and positionally, he's blurring the line between a wing-back and a conventional sort of left-sided midfielder that you'd see in a 4-4-2. Wolves haven't kept a clean sheet this season, and even with the good run, I still don't really back them to keep many teams out at the moment. So that's why Ait-Nouri is the only Wolves defender that I will be mentioning today, but I would not argue with you if you fancy the likes of Dawson or Semedo as a streaming defender option to simply play the fixtures. A few midfield names. Adama Traore again makes an appearance on the pod. Unsurprisingly, his expected goal involvements has now overtaken his actual goal involvements. Such is the inevitable with his performances, which are scary right up until the moment he chooses to shoot or cross the ball. Fulham play Brentford at home this weekend, Wolves at home the week after next, and then have a trip to Spurs, which could see him get a lot of joy. So I still like him, particularly if you're in those leagues that are slightly larger than average, maybe 11 or 12. I think Adama's definitely got a role to play, but I do still think at some stage he's probably going to get dropped for Reece Nelson, who just has that little bit more finesse, albeit doesn't have the same pace and power that Adama Traore obviously has. Buonanotte is a player I picked up myself a couple of weeks ago. Now has 3 goals and 2 assists. He's always making to look things happen. Not afraid to shoot. Has now started 4 games on the bounce in the league. Leicester, despite their obvious shortcomings, have scored in every Premier League game that they've played in so far. His ownership has naturally shot up, and I think with the upcoming fixture against Ipswich, that may yet creep up even higher this week. But many, myself included, will probably be looking for other options the week after when the fixtures take a bit of a turn. Now finally, Savio continues to pass the eye test, and given the injuries starting to pile up, I think we probably will continue to see him play in the Premier League. He is also now lingering slightly behind his expected underlying numbers, and you would expect with his performances in a team such as Manchester City that he should catch up soon. I have a feeling he could have a bit of a breakout game like Doku did last year, where he got over 20 FPL points in a game week. I can't remember what he actually got now, it's 21 and 22. They've got 2 interesting away games in the next 2, both on the south coast against Bournemouth and then Brighton, who defensively I think can very much be got at down their respective left-hand sides, which would suit Savio down to the ground. So yeah, I would expect a goal involvement or 2 over the next couple of weeks from him. And then a few strikers to mention, and Dai, we're mainly just playing the fixtures. Delap again is just a solid option. 50% ownership is probably too low for how he's performing. But one really I'm interested in though is Strand Larsen. Now, if you've seen me comment on questions or heard me talk about these guys before, you'd have probably got the impression, correctly so, that I'm not 100% won over on him just yet, which might sound strange, because he's been okay. He's got a few goals already, but I think the fixture run now that I've just mentioned when talking about 8 Norway, the fixture run that they're now about to embark on, really for all of these guys has to be their time to shine. So, the likes of Larson, Cunha, and the rest of whoever else they play in attack, this is where they can get some returns on the board and where Wolves need to get some wins ultimately if they're going to stay in the Premier League. I'd be shocked. His ownership for Larson is around 40%. I would be shocked if that's not somewhere above 50% by the end of next week. And a player I'd happily take on a trade right now. But if you did look to get him in on a trade, you would probably buy him at quite a premium because of that fixture run. Next, let's get into Draft Duel. Now, we are taking a slight deviation from the pattern that we've kind of set so far. I mean, so far we've talked about a lot of what I would consider middling midfielders. These are midfielders that are generally in your squads. They occasionally flirt with the waiver pile and are kind of getting flung around in lots of trades. The suggestion that came up, and again, this suggestion came out from one of the members in the Discord chat, was of the slightly more premium variety, and that was to look at De Bruyne and Martin Odegaard, which, 2 very similar players in lots of respects. Obviously, De Bruyne is far more advanced in terms of where he's at in his career. But yeah, 2 pretty interesting players to praise. And from the suggestion from one of the members who suggested it, apparently making waves in lots of trades at the moment, which is interesting. So, as we normally do, let's start with De Bruyne. We'll talk about Odegaard and then a bit of a verdict at the end. So, I don't really need to say much about De Bruyne in terms of his history. He's a Premier League legend. He's going into his 10th season with Manchester City now, and it kind of feels so hard to compare a player who is almost beyond compare in a sense, but I will do my best to focus on the present season and try my best to appraise him in the light of 2024 heading into 2025. So let me start by stating that something that fundamentally undermines this whole endeavour is that this all comes down to how many league minutes we really think KDB plays this season. And right now, I have absolutely No idea. One thing I can say for sure is that it will probably end up being around the 2,000 mark. Could be as low as 1,800, could be as high as 2,200. He's injured again at the moment. As I said, that concerns me. It's that vagueness around what exactly is wrong, just a general sense that he's not feeling right. And we've heard this lingo before, and generally it's alluded to what has become a frustrating time for him in terms of niggly injuries. So that doesn't bode well from my perspective. We are a long way away from a Manchester City team that needs him playing week in, week out at the moment. And they can get through the majority of games using the rest of their squad, even with some of the other injuries that they've got. Now, his legs need to be protected, and so relying on him to start versus a Southampton and put up 3 or 4 attacking returns isn't realistic, and those days are probably long gone. I think especially at this stage of the season, they just can't afford to lose him when his presence is best felt in some of those more marquee games, some of those knockout games in the Cups into the new year and beyond. So I don't really need to reiterate how impressive his underlying stats are when he's on the pitch, and trying to calculate what that number could be at the end of the season is completely factored into how many minutes we expect him to play. So conservatively, I've put him around 2,000. That could translate to goal involvements by the end of the season, somewhere between 14 and 17. Now, for Martin Odegaard, obviously first order of business is his current injury and likely return. Now, if we've learned anything from this season, it's that Arteta and Arsenal generally lie every single week about the state of injuries and recovery time, who's fit, who's not, which, to be honest, I'm not sure how it's taken a team until 2024 to work out that there could be some tactical advantage in doing that. But here we are anyway. So he could be back this week, could be next week, could be the week after. It sounds like it's soonish, but we can't reliably say exactly when he'll be back. Now, last season, he was a reliable leader again, logged over 3,000 Premier League minutes for the second season in a row. Got 19 FPL attacking returns last year off the back of 23 the year before. Say, similarly to someone like Saka, if he's fit, he plays. And if he's not 100% fit, he probably still plays. So that's obviously a huge first tick in the box when appraising a player like KDB or Odegaard, those premium players, and means that he's going to be, those types of players that you're going to keep for the whole season. Reliable collector of bonus points due to his passing and chance creation ability, and really putting up output numbers that we've been more familiar with from KDB in his prime. Now, due to the games that he's missed already, I'm giving him a conservative estimate of around 2,500 minutes for the season, which will obviously reflect in a slightly lower tally of goals and assists that, if you had to centre it, would probably fall somewhere around 15. So generally pretty similar to De Bruyne, and you just have to hope that he doesn't kind of piggyback this injury with another injury, which can often happen when you've been out for a little while. So this is very much presumptive on him starting the majority of the rest of the season. So in terms of a verdict, if I knew both were starting at the weekend, even if I didn't know who the opponents were that they were respectively playing, I would take KDB still for a one-off due to his far superior underlying stats over 90 minutes. With these types of players, though, generally when we're trading these guys, we are valuing them, trying to work out where they will be come the final whistle in Game Week 38. And on that basis, for me, Odegaard is the clear winner, as he'll end up comfortably clear of KDB with appearance points, clean sheet points, probably bonus points too. So don't undervalue Odegaard because he's been out injured and he's missed a month. And if somebody in your league is doing that, then make sure that you capitalise on it. Then let's get into the hidden gems, and I'll go through some of these pretty quickly. A few of the other defenders from Everton and Palace who fall into hidden gem territory if you just want a piece of their defences. Plenty of availability there for Young, Lacroix and Chalobah. Dragusin is an interesting one. Now, currently, I have done the predicted lineups already ahead of the weekend for Game Week 10. After that poor performance by Spurs, there are a couple of players who I think could be on the chopping block. One is Maddison, and that's not because Maddison has been playing badly, but because structurally, I think the team looks a lot better with two more disciplined, workman-like midfielders in there, like a Basuma and Sarr. And because of how well Kulusevski's playing, I think Maddison would probably be the one to miss out. In defence, It may seem strange, particularly for neutrals who haven't been watching a lot of Spurs, but I think Romero is due a drop. He based on purely on performances, he should be dropped. It's obviously difficult because he is one of the vice captains. He's quite a senior figure in the squad. Generally a player that you would expect to just start if he's fit. But, if I was Dragusin, who's the obvious like-for-like replacement, if I saw Romero start again at the weekend against Aston Villa, I would really be questioning what would need to happen for me to get a chance in that team. Positionally, he is switching off. He's making individual errors. The back four just isn't really functioning as a back four. And more often than not, Romero seems to be the one that's causing an issue there. So, as it's no more than a hunch, and obviously as a follower, as a fan of Spurs, maybe I look into those things a little bit more deeply than I should be. But I've got a hunch that Dragusin will line up. There is the slight headache with that is that Spurs have the Carabao Cup game tomorrow against Manchester City, for which I expect them to play a full-strength squad. So if, that could give us an indication of what's going on there. If Dragusin started that one, put it this way, if the 11 starts as I've got it predicted for the weekend and get a positive result tomorrow, I could see Ange just fully rolling into the same team again, despite just being, a kind of a shorter turnaround and just sticking with those guys for the time being. But we'll see tomorrow how they line up. Loads of midfield options, which is really the theme of pre-season and the theme of the season as a whole. You definitely want to have one or two streaming midfield spots because of all of these options. Marino there, Lewis Potter and Damsgaard for Brentford. They're going into a decent fixture run. Smodics, I think I said on the last episode, which was obviously 2 weeks ago, that I expected him to get 2 attacking returns over the next 3. So he's currently got 1 in 2. So if that is to come true, he should get another attacking return against Leicester. Matheus Nunes is obviously getting into the team now due to their injuries and looking pretty good. And the other one who I think I would recommend with a little bit more vim and vigour than some of the others is Somerville for West Ham, who came on in the second half, or came on at half-time in that game which West Ham won against United, which obviously proved to be Erik ten Hag's final game, and looked really good. Obviously, Kudus is still out through suspension, so I'm reasonably positive that Somerville will start that match against Nottingham Forest. And again, I can't remember if I've actually said it on here, if I've tweeted it or just said it to someone in passing, but the disrespect that Lopetegui keeps paying Thomas Souček, I don't really get how someone hasn't just put the pattern together that Souček is so integral to West Ham playing well. He may not be, the flashiest, the most technically gifted player, but it just for me, whenever I see Souček's not starting or not playing for West Ham, I just know they're going to struggle, and that's exactly what happened in the first half. I mean, United could have been 3 or 4-0 up. Dalot missed an open goal, chances galore. Soon as Souček and Somerville came on, the game changed. So, and I've got a soft spot for Souček in draft anyway. I've had him off and on over the years. But I'm not touting for him. I'm touting for Somerville. Plenty of ownership across all league sizes and could be a nice little short-term exciting player to have in your teams to get you some all-important points. The most hidden gem pick this week really is a hidden gem. And considering we're talking about 16-team leagues, ownership 0.4% in 16-team leagues. Now, I've said there at the bottom, for those watching, this is very much a long-term investment for both Brighton and for you in your draft teams. I'm talking about Gruder for Brighton, who they signed in the summer for £25 million, I believe, from Mainz 05. He's made 2 substitute appearances for Brighton so far. In terms of last season stats, he got 0.54 non-penalty expected goal involvements per 90. He was the first in the top 7 European leagues for dribbling amongst teenagers. He's now turned 20, so he can't really get into that league table anymore. But a really exciting prospect and somebody that could really match up with the abilities that Matoma has on that left side, on the right side. Definitely going to be some competition for Minter when he's up and running. And I do expect us to see a bit more of Gruder as the weeks go on, especially as they need to rely on their squad a little bit more. And for those of you still holding on to hope that Solly March could become a big asset again, I would just be wary that he could end up being third in the pecking order for that right midfield spot. The get rid list, we're tweaking it as we go. I've added Zinchenko onto that get rid list because he seems to be about 12th choice to get in that defence at the moment. But otherwise, a lot of these players with just a hangover of high ownership from draft day. I suspect we'll have to run some of the numbers, but I suspect a lot of these high ownership are taken from leagues that maybe aren't as active anymore. But we might do a review of that at the next international break. The predicted lineups are up. As I said, I've already done a first draft for Game Week 10. I'll continue to tweak those. I'll probably have to tweak those again on Thursday after the Tuesday and Wednesday night Carabao Cup games. I'm not going to go through them all now in the interest of time, but I will keep those relatively up to date over the coming days up until the wave deadline. I do tweak them after that as well because I know lots of you will glance at those when making some last-minute free agent changes, so they'll be updated right up until Saturday morning. So that is it for this episode. A reminder, the wave deadline is at 11 o'clock on Friday morning. If this is your first time on the YouTube channel, then make sure you give us a thumbs up and click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes as they drop. Likewise, for those of you listening on the audio, be sure to follow on whichever platform you usually listen to your podcasts on so that you get notified whenever a new episode comes out. A final plug for being a signed up member at Draft FC and being able to take advantage of the free 1 month trial DFC Free 24 to get complete access like you would as a fully paid up member, including of course access to the Inner Sanctum and the Draft FC Discord server. So I'm going to leave things there in the interest of time. Best of luck for your matchups ahead of Game Week 10, and until next time, stay sure.